Have you noticed that sometimes the true heroes of the story don't get enough mention? Now that might be because they're so busy taking care of everyone else, they don't have time to sing their own praises. So today, I would like to lift up an unsung hero of the Advent story, Joseph. Sure, he gets mentioned. He's always represented in the nativity scene, looking upon the mother and child with love and care. But many artists have chosen to focus on mother and child for what a pretty picture they make, whether in painting or in song. Joseph often gets sidelined and sometimes dismissed as not Jesus' real father anyway, but that's what makes him all the more heroic. He didn't have to be there at all. He had rights. When Mary returned to Nazareth from visiting her cousin Elizabeth, she was thicker around the middle than an unmarried girl was supposed to be. And it wasn't because of Elizabeth's fine cooking either. Mary was a fallen girl, a disgrace to her family and to her fiancé. Now at that point, Joseph had a choice to make. According to the custom of the time, they were already legally bound. They just hadn't taken the final going home together step, which meant one of two things. Either Joseph had stepped out of bounds, shame on him, or Mary had been disgraced, with or without her consent. What a conundrum. Now Joseph knew that the shame was not his. He had every right to be upset. He certainly had the right to divorce Mary. He had other rights too. A man in Joseph's position could ask for economic compensation in addition to the divorce, the impounding of the dowry, and possible return of the bride price. In those tough economic times, that would have been a smart thing to do. That also would have protected Joseph's status as a righteous man in the eyes of his community, but it also would have meant heaping more shame upon Mary. So Joseph decided to divorce her, but quietly, forfeiting the money he had already given her family. Here we see Joseph's character. It just wasn't worth it to him pushing Mary down even further in order to benefit economically. He was willing to shoulder some financial burden and to accept a measure of social stigma in order to protect Mary from the worst possible scenario. It was good of him. But the angel called him to do something even better, to follow through with the marriage, even though he knew he was not the father of the child. In so doing, he would lead people to assume that he was either guilty of the premarital infraction or he was a fool willing to raise another man's love child. But this was not just any love child. This was God's love child, the child who would share God's great love with the world, inviting all of humanity into a greater circle of love, a more loving covenant with God and with each other. And Joseph's role in this love story is mission critical. Not only did the child need someone to be his father, his provider, his protector, he needed someone with a family lineage that would connect him to King David, to establish his legitimacy as the Messiah, the one chosen by God to be King of the Jews. The gospel writer Matthew, whose first chapter gives us Joseph's story, takes great pains to show that connection. He lists every ancestor in the family tree back to King David, then further back to good old father Abraham. And if you take the time to count them, the number of generations connecting Father Abraham to King David and finally to Jesus align perfectly with the numerology someone would expect for the Messiah. And that last critical link is Joseph, the one God needed for the project to work. But Joseph gave his adopted son something even deeper than a legitimate claim to the title Messiah. He gave him a true understanding of love. Love doesn't turn away from another human being in need, even if it has the right to do so. Love doesn't leave someone to suffer terrible consequences, even if they might have made a terrible decision. Love doesn't say, not my child, not my problem. Love recognizes that there is no such thing as other people's children and claims them at any cost. Joseph offered the gift of sacrificial love, claiming Jesus as his child by giving him a name, Jesus Bar Joseph, meaning salvation, son of Joseph. Jesus would indeed bring salvation, meaning healing and wholeness, to his people. But first, Joseph would have to save him repeatedly, first by marrying the mother and adopting the child, offering as much economic security as a poor carpenter could provide. Second, by fleeing to Egypt when King Herod, jealous due to the rumors that a new king of the Jews had been born, threatened to kill the child. Finally, by returning to Galilee so Jesus could continue his life where God needed him to be. Each decision, each move meant more disruption for Joseph, more danger, more expense. Yet his guiding light was love, the greatest gift he could give God's loved child. Joseph offers us a gift too. His story shows what it means to be human in an unstable world. We too have the right to look away, to tend to our own knitting, to isolate ourselves from the never-ending drama of human suffering, near and far. Not our children, not our people, not our problem. You can live this way. Many of us do. Joseph could have too, but then God's love would have found no welcome here on earth. What if God's love is still looking for a safe home on earth? Will we play a role in sharing God's love by protecting God's beloveds? I know people who do. I am in awe when I consider my friend Brianna, who is raising not only her 4 biological children, but 4 bonus children and frequent extras popping in. I have no idea how she does it. 8 children to feed, to clothe, to guide. She and her husband could have said, nope, no room in our home, sorry. Only they said yes, and they love those children as much as their own. And those kids are growing in love and faith because love didn't look away. I'm also inspired by my own congregation. When I asked them, will you take on these children, welcome them to church, take turns teaching them Sunday school lessons? These people said yes. They didn't have to. None of these kids were biologically related to them. They had their own children and grandchildren to worry about. And teaching Sunday school sounded like a hard thing to do. Whoever feels prepared to step into a classroom with kids you don't know, all different ages, and teach them something you wonder if you even know enough about. But those children have become our children, children we love dearly, and they have taught us at least as much as we have taught them. I could tell you more inspiring stories, just the one, about Hilda Bach, the Holocaust survivor who donated money every month for years so that this one child in Kenya could go to school, and that boy grew up to become a lawyer working for social justice, which would have been good enough, but then that man paid it forward by building an entire foundation that sends many more children to school because he recognized that ignorance is what causes horrors like the Holocaust to happen in the first place. And none of it would have happened if that one Holocaust survivor hadn't decided to help some kid in Africa who wasn't even hers. Only it turns out he was, because remember, there is no such thing as other people's children. That story is told in the documentary film, A Small Act, if you're interested. So let's look around. Where are the children we can help? Not all of us are called to adopt a brood of kids, and not all of us have the capacity to teach, but all of us can do something to show love for the children of the world. We can donate to organizations like United Methodist Committee on Relief, who help displaced people, many of them children, in war-torn Gaza, each of them beloved to God, no matter on which side of the border they were born. We can share resources with our own local food pantries because it is intolerable that any child should go hungry. Whether we have much or little, we can offer it in love for all of God's children. And we can seriously reflect upon how we live all throughout the year. Our seasonal acts of generosity are quite important, as are the routine ways we spend our money, the economic policies we support, and the ways we contribute to either worsening or alleviating poverty. For everything we do has an impact one way or another. My Advent study this year is the first Advent in Palestine. In it, theologian Kelly Mukundeha invites us to consider Advent as a starting place from which we might move into what she calls durable justice work the rest of the year. What does that look like? She writes, imagine giving to a local food bank during Advent and then working on advocacy related to food insecurity and childhood hunger the rest of the year. Imagine learning about the realities around school lunch programs, how many need free or reduced price lunches in your local schools, whether quality meals are offered, and organizing your community to improve what is on offer to kids. Imagine spending the year tackling the policies that create food deserts, which keep many neighborhoods undernourished. But there are many other possibilities: affordable housing and tenants' rights, fair wages, accessible health care and medications, or indigenous land rights. That's a tall order, isn't it? We don't have to go that far. Not everyone does. But if no one ever did, then there would have been no advent of Jesus, the salvation of the world. If Joseph had told himself that Mary's love child was not his problem to solve, not his burden to bear, instead he said yes, showing us a bright new definition of love for a world longing for salvation. Salvation would be named Jesus, God's love child, and Joseph's too. Love to you all.